What's a prose poem? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's a poem that's written without lines. Thanks for watching.
If only we were that lucky. He'll be back.
Now, I bet that subverted your expectations, didn't it?
No, it did not.
Well, if you're still recovering from my shocking introduction, just keep that subverting expectations thing in your back pocket for later. It might just come in handy.
It won't. It never does.
Anyway, like I said, we as people sometimes like to be vexed about the difference between poetry and prose. Sometimes you'll hear people try to include some measure of quality in the definition of prose, like there's regular old writing on one hand, and then there's prose. But the actual distinction really isn't that complicated. If it's written in lines, it's poetry. If it's written in paragraphs, then it's prose. Thanks for watching. No, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. That's a really simple way to distinguish the two, but you and I both know there's a little more to it than that. And if we really want to start getting to the bottom of the prose poem, we're going to have to talk about rhetoric. Well, I guess we don't have to, but if you're here, I'm assuming it's because you want to. I know I do. So when we're thinking rhetorically, we're thinking about how our writing works in context and in relation to an audience. Depending on the context, audiences will approach texts with different kinds of expectations. If you open up an instruction manual designed for a context where you're building a bookshelf, you'll expect that manual to work in a certain way. And those expectations will then influence how you read it. If you've ever had to deal with instructions that didn't work the way you expected them to, well, I bet that was frustrating for you, wasn't it? Those expectations can influence how you read. So let's play a little game together. What do you say? I like to call it, What Did You Expect? And here's our first puzzle. When I show you this text, how does it make you feel? What do you expect from it? Okay, answers in. Did you expect maybe some rhyming, some pretentious diction, imagery, lyricism? Did you feel a little nervous or maybe excited to read it? Well, how about puzzle 2? We'll put some time on the clock, and again, your question is, what do you expect from a text that looks like this? Did you feel like a teacher was going to ask you to read it and tell them what it really means? Or did it just seem like normal stuff? Did it pique your emotions or seem more neutral? Would you expect it to be more artsy or more functional? Even with just the visual representation of a text, we can already see some of the preloaded rhetorical expectations that readers bring to poetry and to prose. We just don't read them in the same context, so we expect different things from them. As a result, audiences tend to relate to poetry differently from how they relate to prose. So tell me, Kaput, what did our lucky contestants win?
Well, probably to hear more of your yapping.
Hey, that's right. You're actually pretty good at guessing. Maybe you should play the game sometime.
Yeah, I'll pass.
So anyway, here's the initial rhetorical fun of writing a prose poem. Like the name suggests, it is a poem, but it's a poem written in prose, and that means that it does all the things that poems do. Lyricism, a focus on intentional language use, including the sounds of language, imagery, metaphor, etc., but it all gets packaged up as a cute little paragraph. So a common way to talk about the prose poem is to say that it sort of works to disarm a reader. If you have a lot of negative experiences with poetry in your history, the unassuming block of prose won't raise the same alarm bells. Before you know it, you've been pleasantly tricked into reading a poem. On the other hand, if you like poetry, the lack of lines challenges you to reconsider your notions about what poetry is or should be. If the line is poetry's most distinctive feature, well, what happens when you get rid of it? And because of all that, prose poetry can be a tool for subverting expectations. See, I told you that was going to come back.
So you fulfilled our expectations of subverted expectations. What a tour de force this all is.
But I hear you. Taking the line breaks out of a poem might be a parlor trick that only wows the crowd for so long. Sure, it's a good way to throw off the tyranny of alexandrines and pentameters and whatever else, but at the end of the day, it is just a poetic paragraph. And in the early days, that was surprising enough, but that history of flouting conventions means that prose poetry is also fertile ground now for surrealism, strangeness, and genre-defying innovation. Take Mattia Harvey's Wolf Sister or Shivani Mehta's Useful Information for the Soon-to-be Beheaded, for example. As long as you're scandalizing the stuffy poems have to rhyme and be about daffodils crowd by writing your poetry in prose, well, you might as well throw in some wonderful content weirdness too. Although, and you didn't hear this from me, it might almost be the more subversive thing to write traditionally lyrical and more well-behaved prose poems like Gary Young or Joseph Stroud. Prose poems like theirs tend to be about the typical nature and human stuff, leaning more heavily on the tools of language than on the tools of form. Once a subversive form gets established, making it less subversive maybe becomes the subversive thing to do. Which is really all just to say that there's a ton of fun to be had writing prose poetry. But I also think even if you don't end up being a prose poet, there's a lot of value in writing prose poetry every once in a while. A few years into my committed journey as a poet, I learned about prose poetry and decided to write a lot of little prose pieces. And we can pretend that I was going through some kind of provocative artist's phase, but the truth was really that I had no good intuition for when or where to break a line in any kind of way that just didn't feel totally arbitrary. In the same way that poets writing in set forms like sonnets can lose control of the piece in their preoccupation with following the rules, worrying about line breaks can become a distraction to some new poets. And for me, writing prose poetry gave me a period to really practice with the quality of my language, to zero in on word choice and imagery and syntax without also worrying about the complexities of lines. And for a lot of writers now, writing and reading prose is probably much more familiar and intuitive than writing in verse. So if you are interested in writing poetry but don't have a lot of experience with it, prose poetry might just be the key to getting started. Don't worry about all the obvious, visible, but much less important features of poetry like lines, and instead prioritize keen attention to detail, precise language, striking imagery, and more. If you really must, you can always deal with the line breaks in a later draft, but for now, you can just work in little chunks of prose with absolute focus on the essential lyrical qualities of great poetry. And of course, if you're looking for more on what makes a poem, hint, it's not rhymes or lines, check out the linked videos on the end screen. But in the end, whether you're a confident poet looking to try out something new and experimental, or a new poet looking to bridge the gap between your experience with prose and the wide open world of poetry, the prose poem might just be what you're looking for. So give it a try, see what happens, and tell us how it went next week. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you again soon.